Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Carrie Anderson. Nate Caminos.
Present.
Paula Carballo. John Chalmanek.
Here.
Gordon McHenry Jr.
Present.
Harold Odom.
Here.
Damian Patnode.
Here.
Adrian Quinn. Michael Ramos. Sarah Rankin.
Present.
Simha Reddy.
Here.
Juanita Spotted-Elk.
Present.
And
I would note that Carrie Anderson just joined. Carrie, we're just doing the roll.
Present.
Nice to see you, Reverend Anderson.
Thank you.
Everyone, God bless you. God bless you.
I would just note at this point, I believe we have a quorum.
Thank you. So, Juanita Spokenal is the only Indigenous person on both the governance and implementation board. So I thought it would be appropriate for her to do the land acknowledgement.
Hi, everybody. Just want to thank you and welcome everyone into this space. I always like to say this space is sacred and everyone that does this work is sacred. And thank you, Harold, for your awesome work and everybody in this critical time. And I'm going to do the land acknowledgement for this Northwest Territory, which is, we acknowledge that all U.S. land is originally Native American land, indigenous land here in the Pacific Northwest. The Coast Salish are the original residents, protectors of this land. Some of the Coast Salish tribes are not currently recognized by the federal government, such as the Duwamish tribe, thus limiting their access to key privileges granted by federally recognized tribes. Native Americans have been present in our region for thousands of years and remain present to this day. And I'm just glad to be a part of this circle and just grateful for everyone. God bless.
Thank you, Juanita. Thank you very much. So we'll have 10 minutes of public comment today. So we'll have 10 minutes of public comment on the agenda for the public to comment. If you'd like to provide verbal comment, please type your name and the city which you are calling from into the chat. The city, into the chat. Carrie will build a queue, or from this build a queue for public comment. The public comment period of the agenda. In addition, you may use the chat function to provide written comment starting now until the end of the public comment of the agenda. I am so sorry. I have a bad printout and my glasses, as you can see, fell off, but they're broken.
Got it there, Harold. And so I can just read the next part here to kick things off in that light. So now let's go ahead and take public comment. We've set aside 10 minutes per Harold's movement there to hear from the members of the public. If you wish to comment and have not yet typed your name and city in the chat window to be called upon, please do so now. Each individual will be given 2 minutes to comment. Carrie will call on individuals in the order they have been provided into the chat window and unmute them. Carrie will announce when you reach your 2 minutes and ask you to finish your comment and call on the next speaker. Harold and I will close public comment 10 minutes from now, which is 5:19 p.m. So public comment is now open. We'll give it a minute. Okay, seeing none. For anyone who did not have an opportunity to provide comment and would still like to, we will leave the chat window open for the next 10 minutes. From that, let's move on to the next portion of the agenda. And thank you, Harold, for kicking us off. Moving on to the CEO recruitment discussion portion of today's agenda. On February 4th, we recommended Regina Cannon as King County Regional Homelessness Authority's first CEO. That same day, the governing committee confirmed our recommendation, and last week, Ms. Cannon declined the appointment offer. Regina Cannon is highly respected and nationally recognized as a passionate ally of the underserved. She is a champion of individuals who desperately need a voice. Although she was drawn to the needs of the King County regional homelessness population, in the end, she determined that there was still much to be done in her current community. Her dedication to fulfilling her commitment is commendable, and we wish her continued success. We do want to talk about several options that we have moving forward for this process, and about 4 of them that I'll raise with you, and then I'll patch it over to Leo and Helen to share more. But the first is essentially discussing the other finalists. The second being review a broader candidate pool and see if we want to bring anyone back to interview. Third being hire an interim CEO and restart the recruitment process. And the fourth is we don't bring on an interim CEO and we restart the recruitment process like we did this past fall. To be able to speak a little bit more to this, ask Leo and Helen, who are joining us tonight, to share the implications for you all and us all as a board to consider. So Leo or Helen, whoever wants to start us off.
You want to go ahead, Leo?
Sure. Good evening to members of the board. Leo Floor, and I'm the Director of King County's Department of Community and Human Services. I don't have a lot to offer in terms of analysis other than wanting to answer your questions. I think the things that we're considering overall as we take a look at implications are timing, obviously, the process that has already occurred. And I think the other is just the fact that we all know that we have an ongoing crisis that merits attention and action right now. But what I would prefer to do is to answer questions that you might have as you take a look at options, mindful of the fact that even though I'm the department director, my job here is really as a staff to you all to help you in your analysis as opposed to shape a particular outcome. So Helen, I don't know if there's anything else you'd want to add.
I guess I would just emphasize that in our city's Human Services Department, we are stretched pretty thinly in the Homelessness Strategy and Investment Division. Our team's managing 180 contracts at half the staff capacity needed to support the work. 15 of the 29 employees remain, and a third of them are temporary. So it's kind of important to us that we get a CEO on board, and timing is very important. I guess I would note that if there's going to be significant delay, we would kind of probably have to look at hiring, and these jobs are complex, so training, it kind of burdens the people who are there already and doing an inordinate amount of work to also do the training. And Leo's mentioned that we're in the midst of a crisis in terms of homelessness compounded by COVID-19. And I think that that's probably, I'm just emphasizing similar items.
Thank you, Leo and Helen. I saw Sarah raise her hand. Sarah,
Thank you. I feel like there needs to be maybe a fifth option, which is to find out, get some debriefing from Regina. You know, our whole board was very involved in the interview process, but we've had no information from Regina about why she passed on the position, I don't know that we can intelligently continue with a CEO process until we get some sort of debriefing from her about why she passed. I think that's pretty standard, and I think it would really benefit the entire board for us to be able to have a conversation with us if she's willing to do it. Maybe she's not, but to find out what her concerns were, and what some of the considerations were firsthand from her, so that we can have a better understanding of what we can learn from the process that we just went through. We devoted a substantial amount of time to it. I think it would be a mistake for us to do anything without doing a little bit of post-mortem analysis to figure out, what we can learn from that situation.
Thank you, Sarah. I see Harold's hand up, and then John.
Yes. So my raising hand function is not working on my screen. So I had the pleasure of speaking with Mrs. Cannon today, and she reached out because my email was bounced back, and she wanted to make sure that she reached out and said how grateful she was for the job being offered to her. And in our talk, she did agree that she would like to come into an executive session and maybe speak about one of the things, or a few of the things that she found concerning if she took the job. And I would like maybe the board to consider that.
Just calling Sola Plumacher too from staff side in terms of anything that she might be able to share to Sarah's question before we move to John for his question.
Thanks, Nate. I just wanted to offer that I had several conversations, both Jeannie and myself had several conversations with Regina, and she was incredibly thoughtful and really wanting to make the best decision possible for the regional authority. Felt that her current work was really important, and it was going to be a difficult time for her to leave that work to join us here in Seattle for a number of reasons. But I think what's important to really emphasize is that she is really committed to the work that she is currently doing in her community, and was going to really struggle with kind of extricating herself from that work. I wish it's something we had known earlier, but unfortunately that's not the case. I don't know that we can have Regina come in and share information in an executive session, because I don't think that fits with OPMA guidelines. We would not be deliberating about a candidate. And so Deanna, I would ask you if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I appreciate that. And while I appreciate the mention of having that conversation in an executive session, I agree that it would need to be analyzed with that lens in mind. It is that the exception from the open public meetings requirement is to deliberate on the qualifications of a potential applicant, not for that person necessarily to debrief the board. But
what about a public session then?
A public session, absolutely. Anything can be discussed in a public session. Anything that we've mentioned here so far can be discussed in a public session for sure.
I'd like to see the specific provisions. I hate to sound a little emotional about this, but it seems foolhardy to me for this board not to have the opportunity to learn from the candidate as to, why. I appreciate that we're getting filtered information from staff, but I don't know how. I think it's highly beneficial for this board to have an opportunity, especially if she's indicated that she's willing to talk with us, for us to become educated about what concerns she had about the position. It's sort of sticking in my craw. I may be out here alone, and maybe everybody else is satisfied with just wanting to go ahead and dive headlong into thinking about other CEO candidates. But it's not uncommon for folks to get a debrief from a candidate that passes when you're going back to the well, so to speak.
Just before we go on, I would just like to acknowledge that Paula is here, and welcome, Paula.
Thank you for that. We go on to John, then Michael, then Simha.
So I don't really have any problem with having a debrief with her if she would do it in public, but I'm pretty sure it would have to be a public session. Helen, I had a very quick question for you, which is is it because of the drop in revenues that your staff is down as much as it is? So were those COVID related rifts, if you will, reductions in force? What's going on there? I don't know much about the department.
It's actually more about the scheduled transition in June. And so employees had no security or about future employment. And so if they were able to obtain permanent positions elsewhere, they did so. And like I said, about a third of the group that we have now are temporary. So they were hired knowing that it would be for a short period of time. So it's more about the scheduling around the standing up of the regional authority. And that's why the staff is getting smaller and smaller, because the regional authority should be moving forward toward hiring. And anyone who would like, of course, is eligible to apply for positions with the regional authority.
Okay, and is there a time limit on the temporaries? In other words, if they get up to working like more than half a year full time, would they have to? Okay.
I don't think we have to worry in that regard.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I didn't know why that was the case. I appreciate the answer.
Thank you, John. We'll go to Michael, then Simha.
Thank you. I'd like to be marked as present. I agree with Sarah. There's learnings to be had, and the candidate who's declined an offer has offered to share more information about her reasoning for not accepting the position, which indicates there's more to be said. I think it'd be prudent for us to take the learnings from this and then decide on the process as far as proceeding. I think that, yeah, it's conceivable that we were caught off guard by a person not accepting the position, and that's okay. But we all have differing information coming into this public meeting. And I've had members of the public who may have heard more than I have, and I'm a member of the implementation board. So I think there's information to be shared. It can be shared in public, or the candidate, Regina, could submit some comments in writing that help us to learn, as a simple, if you have more to share, we'd be glad to receive it. And it can be received in whatever way is legally appropriate. And that would give us a firm basis on which to proceed. And then I think then we can all be in accord about, the best direction. We understand there's urgency, but there's also importance to get this right. So just a thought there. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I have Simha, then Juanita.
I appreciate the desire for us to know what Ms. Cannon's thinking behind declining this offer is. I mean, I would love to know, I think, in detail. But I don't think we should hold off on anything in waiting for that. And I'll say for two reasons. One, there's urgency, like we want to move forward. But two, can anybody think of a single thing that she could share that we could then change in our position, right? Could we change our, how much can we change the pay? Some degree, maybe the benefits a touch. We can't change the fundamental structure of the RHA, and we can't change the players who exist within the community. So if we can't change this position, like the additional information we get from her is not going to help us that much, and not enough to justify holding, I think. That's my feeling on it.
Thank you, Simha. Juanita, then Pastor Anderson.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Sarah and with Ramos. They just took the words right out of my mouth. I just thinking of her feedback and just bring some analysis. I heard the word analysis, and I think that's always beneficial to help us to get grounded and really just feedback. I don't think there's anything wrong with feedback in the public forum that everyone mentioned, and being transparent, you know, and we're here for the people, to serve the people, and especially our homeless relatives, and keeping them in mind. And yes, there is an urgency, so I'm in agreement with all of you. And I know that we can all be in unison about that we want to be here to all help and bring contributions and brainstorm, and also do that work that's necessary in moving forward and taking those steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Juanita. Pastor Anderson.
Thank you, Nate. And let me say to the group, this is really some rich discussion. My question is more of a technical question, in that, how does this impact our timeline to onboard this position? Because we all know that there's an urgency. We all know that there's a need. We all know that there are people that are in need of services. So whether or not Regina consents to talk with us, it's great if she will, but if not, how does all of this impact the timeline of the launch? That's basically my question. Are we still in the queue to start when we had proposed to start, or does this move the playing field goal line a little further back?
I guess Leo and Helen, the options that we have, the 4 options that I believe we have before us now, to add to Pastor Anderson's question, which of the 4 do you feel will be challenging timeline-wise than others? I mean, as an example, if we were able to identify and approve and bringing on a CEO, interim CEO, to start the process, to the point you had shared earlier about the June timeline, from your perspective, how does that kind of fit from your guys' thoughts?
I think the way that I would start the answer is, one, it's what actions must happen. And so I think for the what the ILA requires is that the implementation board and governing committee co-recruit a candidate, and then that the implementation board recommend a finalist, and that the governing committee then confirm that finalist. So 2 of the options that you have, would essentially build upon some level of the existing recruitment. So you'd already have satisfied that one condition, and then it's whatever process is necessary for the implementation board to recommend, and then the governing committee to confirm. And those would be special or regular meetings. Whereas the other 2 options, the last 2 options, wouldn't have satisfied that first co-recruitment. And so if you were to re-recruit, you would have to go through that process again. And that obviously equals time. I think and without taking a position on any of it, the ILA also contains a provision by which King County and the City of Seattle can provide interim staffing. It does not specifically address interim staffing at the CEO level. So I think that's something that's silent in the ILA, but that's the way that I'd begin to answer the question is, what does the ILA require? And then what of that have you already done in the first 2 options versus the last 2 options? Helen, I don't know if there's anything you would add.
No, I think that, Leo, you've outlined the rules, the applicable rules. I guess I would simply note it's taken us a year to get to this point. And the transition was scheduled to take place in June. So we're already about six months, I don't know if that's right, Sola, behind where we had expected to be, or the timeline that we set out for ourselves. But I think it's a valid point that was made in terms of it's important to do it right as well. And so defer to your judgment about that.
So if I can say something just for the implementation board, we did pick the right candidate in our minds, and so did the governance council. This rush to pick another candidate should be tempered of, yes, Ellen, doing the right thing and getting the right person in line. But as far as the past, we have been diligent in our duties in getting a CEO. Unfortunately, she declined. So I would have pushed back on that. It's taken us a year to get this far. You know, in other words, things happen, and we need to be diligent in our approach. That's all.
Harold, okay, we'll go to Damien and Sarah next.
Just to echo some of the comments on my boards, I mean, a phrase or saying I've always liked is to be quick but don't hurry. So I appreciate Simha's comment around urgency, but I also think for efficiency purposes, there might be some opportunities to hear from Ms. Cannon that might not require it being during a public meeting, and whether that's Mr. Ramos's suggestion around a letter, or quite frankly, the co-chairs having the opportunity to meet with Ms. Cannon on behalf of the board and then having that be able to inform the process. I would truly recommend not wait till our next meeting to hear from Ms. Cannon, that there's some other ways to get that feedback that can inform the process moving forward that I think balances both the sense of urgency that people are feeling, as well as the desire to be diligent in this practice to find the right person to come on board.
Thanks, Damien. Before we go to Sarah, just to your point, if that's the decision that the board would like us to move forward, should Regina not be open to coming in a public session, we'd be happy to work with all board members and pulling together a list of questions and things that you'd like us to engage her in conversation and circle back with you. But let's go to Sarah, then Gordon next.
Thank you, Nate. And I fully support, I think Damien said it perfectly, and I would support his proposal, which builds on Michael's comment. And I think there's a way for us to, it's important to keep in mind, you know, we talk about how long this has taken. This board, in terms of focusing on the CEO process, we acted extremely expeditiously once we had the information in front of us. I mean, once we knew we didn't even know who the candidates were until you know, right before we met and interviewed them, and then we went through that process very quickly. So I think the process of this board being able to do its job, we can act expeditiously. We just also need to do it wisely, so I appreciated Damien and Michael's effort to try and figure out a way for us to be able to learn from Regina's comments and feedback in whatever way would be most appropriate for her and for the board. But I think it would be foolhardy for us to continue on with things and pretend like what happened didn't happen and to miss the opportunity to learn from it.
And did you have a point to that before we move to Gordon's comment or question? I saw a hand raised on Helen's side. Helen, no comment or question on your end?
Oh, no, I just wanted to clarify that I didn't mean it as a criticism of this group. There was a process long before it came to you that was pretty detailed and involved a variety of groups and work groups and the search firm. So I just mean the overall process, not the speed with which the IB moved. So just a clarification.
Gordon?
Just a few thoughts. I'm intrigued that Regina has some input for us that she wants to share, and I think it makes sense for us to hear it. Maybe it's what Simha said earlier. I'm interested in hearing it, but I don't want to unduly slow down the process to get a CEO hired and in the seat and getting this regional authority up and running. So I support the idea of reaching out to Regina and having her communicate back to us what she wants to communicate, either in public session or with our co-chairs, and we have a chance to provide some queries if we want. I will say that my context is that a process was undertaken. We ended up with two incredibly strong candidates, and I felt like either one of them could have led this new authority. And so I am one who wants to hear from Regina if she's willing to share, but I'm one who urges us to get busy and get a candidate in here who wants the position and who we feel is qualified and able to successfully lead something that's never been done before. Stop there.
Gordon Simha.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think we should accept any feedback she has for us. It would be, well received, I'm sure. I have kind of two questions. The first is for Leo and Helen. If you can give us a little bit more information about how an interim CEO would work, who that potential person could be, where they would come from within the county, if you have that information. And then second, I'd just love to hear from other people on the board what your thoughts are on these four options. I'd love to start that discussion once we're.
I think what you see with an interim CEO option is really just an attempt to exhaust the possible options and present them to you. We have not really developed this course of action and do not have a person identified, for example, that we would recommend. So have not really moved down this at all. I think what we are simply trying to do is present the full menu of options to inform your discussion. I do think that if we are talking about an interim CEO, we would have to go back and actually develop what that would even look like if that's the direction from the board.
Thank you, Leo. And to Sarah's earlier question to Deanna as our counsel, if you can follow up with the exact language on the OPMA regarding the executive sessions for this issue, that'd be great after today's meeting. Also, just to somewhat addressing your question too, and then looking at the four options we have before us, let's see the first two, and Deanna, correct me if I'm wrong. We do, one, want to discuss the other finalists, two, review a broader candidate pool and see if we want to bring anyone back in to interview. Those first two of those four options, those are items that I could entertain a motion to go back into executive session to discuss those candidates and qualifications. Is that correct, Deanna?
So I can actually let you know the language of the statute right now. The OPMA allows an executive session to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment or to review the performance of a public employee. So if you are all evaluating the qualifications of an applicant, that can be discussed in executive session. So if you have a potential new applicant, or if you're reviewing the qualifications of someone that you've already have in the pipeline, then absolutely you can go into executive session for that.
And again, board, happy to entertain a motion to go in that light, but somehow to more directly answer your question, at least in sharing my perspective as a board member too. I feel like it's even in this conversation that we've had here for the past half hour or so, we may not all be collectively in a position to take action on any one of these four options right now. Is at least my perspective and what I've been able to garner. I think there's a lot more questions and exploring information gathering that we still need to do. One of the fortunate things that we have is that we do have a set regular board meeting next Wednesday that while we have drafted an agenda, as Harold and I had, things that were really more regular business, not this is before Regina's decision, we can certainly work with staff in restructuring next week's agenda to better tee ourselves up as a follow-up to what our conversations are today, particularly on any matters that the board would like Harold and I and or staff to explore to come back to the board next Wednesday to present.
And just to follow up with that, if there are discussions regarding a broader process or kind of options of where to go from here, as opposed to specifically discussing qualifications of a specific applicant, then those do need to be discussed in open session. So just as a little gentle reminder.
Great. Thank you, Deanna.
I'm sorry, can you state that one more time?
Yeah, you bet. So discussions regarding more agency-wide or process decisions, so not specific to the qualifications of a specific applicant. Those discussions need to happen in open session. So for example, the process discussion that you're having right now, we would want to make sure this conversation stays in open session and does not go into an executive session. And sometimes it was just a gentle reminder of when you some parts of the conversation have to stay out in open session.
Thank you. And before you continue, Nate, Helen or Leo, you said, Leo, that the city or county could provide the interim. Does it have to come from someone within the city or the county?
So for me to clarify what I was saying, as I list the provisions that are required in the interlocal agreement, there's the part again about co-recruitment, recommendation, and confirmation. There's a separate provision within the ILA that allows for, and this was just as we looked at the whole document to see what data you would want, that allows for interim staffing. It is silent as to whether the CEO would qualify in that interim staffing. So the ILA literally says nothing there. And so there is not a ILA-based decision or piece of guidance that I'm aware of, and I would ask Helen or Deanna to opine too, that answers your question, Harold. That I think we would be in interpretive territory at that point.
Yeah, go if you have any thoughts, yeah, go ahead.
I'm happy to add some language there. In section 5, there is some language regarding the chief executive officer, and there is language that says that until the governing committee has approved an organizational structure and staffing plan, the authority shall be staffed by employees from the parties on loan to the authority. And then it says, subject to any applicable collective bargaining agreement, the chief executive officer may be responsible for supervising staff on loan from the parties. This suggests that the staff on loan will be not those other than the chief executive officer, but it doesn't preclude, and I completely agree with Leo here, it doesn't preclude the chief executive officer. It also, reading this language together with the language that Leo was referring to, I think supports the conclusion, supports a decision that if you wanted to, you could move forward with a individual who is currently an employee of one of the parties to the interlocal agreement. I do have to say, for all practical purposes, I don't think that when the ILA was being drafted that this scenario of what's happening right now was contemplated. But I do have to say that with other interlocal entities that I've worked with, it's not uncommon at all for either as a startup or in some kind of interim fill in the gap until you can find a new director type of a scenario, to have someone on loan temporarily from one of the parties. I've seen that happen a couple of times. If that's helpful at all.
Yeah, thank you, Deanna, for that. We'll go back to our queue here. We have John, then Sarah.
Thank you. Let me just make sure. Yeah, I'm off. I'll drop my hand. I think I can ask this question and get a public answer. Did the folks who did the recruiting, and it could even be, I think there were some board members who were involved in that before we got the semifinalists and then determined the finalists, were there others who were sort of on the brink but didn't quite make it so that we could still have another interview? Or are the and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name of the group that did the work on bringing the folks to us, but is there another person who was already in the recruitment process who we might be able to bring in for an interview? Or did they pretty much say the people who we interviewed were the best?
I wasn't a part of that process prior to our semifinalists, finalist interviews in January. So I'm not sure
Okay.
who on here was and may be able to speak to answer that question. I just will say before if there is an opportunity for someone to be able to help speak to John's question, I will add, however, that obviously our finalists, who, just to point out, went through 2 meet and greets and also had another semifinalist and finalist interview. So there'd be a process that I think we as a board would still want to go through in that light. But if going back to John's question, if anyone has anything that they'd like to share to that. Okay.
And if you don't, I would like to find out that information.
Okay.
So if staff could go back, get that information. If there's, I'm trying to do this without saying how many people we interviewed, because I can't remember if we said publicly how many people we interviewed. But if there is another person who might be capable of doing it, that's also an option.
Thanks, John. And Deanna, you're our legal consultant. I'm nowhere near that expertise and understanding, but given what the parameters you just shared earlier, that could be something that we could be discussing in the executive session, correct?
Discuss qualifications of a candidate for employment, yes.
Okay.
So discussing those individuals, absolutely.
Okay, I had John, then Sarah, so we'll go Sarah, then Michael.
Sorry, I thought you were saying John, then Sarah, but John just went. I just wanted to see, just as a matter of process, whether an additional option is to see, and I just pulled up the OMPA and was looking at the language to see if there's any other provisions that would work in this circumstance. If Regina is not willing, and I can think of a million reasons why someone in her position would not enjoy a public session. Maybe she would be willing to do that. But if she has sensitive information to give us, which I have heard from different sources may be the case, and I can imagine circumstances where she would have some sensitive information to share with us. Is it appropriate for, is it something that can be done under the rules for our co-chairs to reach out and speak to her and report back to us on any concerns that she may have? Or is that something where even the results of that discussion would be part of the public process?
I'm going to take that question as addressed to me. I'm more than happy to answer. The prohibition is against having a meeting where the information is not discussed in the public context. So long as there is not a meeting, then there should be no violation of the OPMA. Having a group of less than a quorum, for example, breaking up into smaller groups, having smaller meetings, those would not violate the letter of the OPMA. So I would say that is a method that is used given the language of the OPMA for sure.
Thank you.
So,
John, I have you in the queue for a question, but if you have something pertinent.
Well, it was just a reaction to that. I mean, what you just talked about, if what you just suggested is, in my mind, a rolling meeting. And I think you have to be very careful of that, going back to the Shoreline case from about 10 years ago, on the ability of having a rolling meeting or a rolling email discussion. Where you're essentially getting around having a meeting by having a bunch of mini meetings. So I'd be concerned about that.
I think if there was, I would most definitely agree with you. And perhaps we should look into this further. But if there were some kind of decisions being made or polling or some kind of, negotiations that are happening, but if it's just fact finding and then reporting and it sounds more palatable to me, but I would certainly be more than happy to look further into it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right, let's go to Michael, then Simha.
So apropos of John's comments, it may be desirable to review particular candidates' qualifications. That being said, what it may require is us to discuss in public the process that was engaged in, that led us to the candidate who was selected, and then to go into executive session to review the qualifications of a particular candidate or particular candidates. So I think that may be a good option to pursue.
And I want to make sure that we're separating the discussions with the candidate that was recommended and was selected and is no longer a candidate, and no longer discussing qualifications of the candidate, which I don't think can be discussed in executive session, with the discussion that may occur with actual candidates and their qualifications, which arguably could fall within the executive session rules. So we're discussing two different things. And then process, agency-wide process. So the process that's used to select the candidates does need to occur in open session. So I think that there's just a whole lot of sub topics within this overall conversation.
Thanks, Deanna. Before I go on to Simha and then John in terms of the queue, let's take a pause here. Call on Sola to talk a little bit more about the process. Just stay on this and go ahead, Sola.
Yeah, so I just wanted to do a quick reminder of what went on to get us to this place, or at our last conversation, the place we were at. We convened a group of individuals representing governing committee, impacted staff, members with lived experience, to engage in both the recruitment, determining who the recruitment firm would be for the CEO process, and then moved into the development of the recruitment process and interview process, as well as selection. So that group met regularly over the course of the summer to help lead the Hawkins firm in developing this process. I think if you'll remember correctly, and I don't have my notes up in front of me, if you'll remember correctly, we provided an update, and I can send that around to folks with how we were progressing in terms of the material development of the necessary criteria that we wanted a candidate to embody. We provided an update on the number of applicants who went through an initial process, which was about 16. And then we went through the next phase, looking at a much more refined set of skills and candidates, and designed an interview process, which Hawkins conducted. And then 4 total candidates were brought to the implementation board for interviews. Remember, that process started in earnest back in August to get us to this point in January. Well, now it's March.
Thank you, Sola. Go back to our queue here. Simha, John, then Juanita.
With regards to that idea earlier of having co-chairs speak to Regina confidentially and then reporting back to us in small groups, that idea doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't seem to be in the spirit of treating this openly. I think if we want to have them meet with Regina and learn some information, and then I will trust, frankly, I will trust our co-chairs to act on that information in improving the process. That'll do, but I don't want to do more than that. The second piece, though, Sola, I am really glad you shared that timeline, because I think it reinforces something Harold said earlier, which was this process worked in the sense that we got a really strong candidate, a couple of good strong candidates, and that it really included a lot of people in this process of choosing the right person for the job. And I think we should take some time in executive session, potentially and hopefully this meeting, to be able to talk through the qualifications of the other people that move through that process. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I'll go to John next.
Actually, I guess where I am on it is I actually, although hearing what I heard tonight gives me a little pause. I actually would prefer going with an interim, doing the process to find an interim and get this going. I know that there'll be a process to have to do that. Maybe we need to talk to the governing boards, and maybe we need to go back to the 2 councils. But I think that is the best way to get someone who can really form and work this regional agency. I have shared a name or two with Nate when he called me as, maybe even a consultant who would be doing this.
Thanks, John. We have Juanita and Gordon.
I just have some clarification about the options, and I know people talked about. So I just want to know the Hawkins Group, are they still involved in this process? Because that was a lot of work, that was a lot of money, a lot of energy went into that. So I'm just wondering, is that one of the options? I just wanted some clarification.
Staff will jump in, but if we were to move forward with one of our current candidates, I believe that's something that we could ask the Hawkins Group to continue with.
I mean, are they part of this conversation? That's what I was wondering. Or is it like their work is just done? That's why I was wanting to know.
Thanks for the question, Juanita. I think they delivered on their contract with the city of Seattle. I would note too, just for the record, that we started working to recruit Hawkins back in February of March of last year. And they did not begin working in earnest until August. So it was a lengthy process to find that firm and get them started. They have completed the majority of their work in this process, but we continue to discuss with them what we need going forward to make sure that we have we're managing through successfully on this process.
Okay,
thank you. Okay, we'll go to Gordon, then Carrie.
I didn't know if Juanita had finished speaking. Couldn't quite tell.
Yeah, I've done. Thank you. I know, do all those things and just kind of not have to start from scratch, but at least starting from there, would be good.
Yeah. I guess I'm going to add on. I'm going to reassert that I'm interested in hearing from Regina Cannon. Appreciate Simha's point that we need to view trust in our processes. So open session seems reasonable, and then potentially there could be follow up if needed, but we do it in some sort of open process. I really appreciated Sola going through the timeline and reminding us that we had 4 candidates at Hawkins and the team recommended to us, and we evaluated. So I think because of the gravity of the situation, I'll avoid using urgency, the time that has passed and the effort that went into it, we should, as a board, evaluate of those 4, now 3, because Regina has declined, are any of those 4 that were qualified enough to be recommended to us to evaluate and interview, whether any of those 3 are still interested in competing to be the CEO of the regional authority. And if they are, we evaluate whether we move forward with any 1, 2, or 3 of them in terms of the continuation of a process. I'm going to stop there. I don't think if we were to follow that process that we would have to engage with the Hawkins group, and I might have some concerns, but I do think we had candidates who we were looking at very carefully through as a result of an open and inclusive process just a few weeks ago. And I think just as much as we have the responsibility to listen to a candidate, to the finalist, if she's willing to talk to us, we shouldn't waste the opportunity to evaluate whether any of those three are still interested and available. Stop.
Thank you, Gordon. Pastor Anderson?
Yes, thank you. With all of the valued voices that we've been hearing tonight, I just want to ask the question, what do we hope to accomplish in tonight's meeting other than what we've been discussing? It's valued conversation, courageous conversation. What is the hope for this meeting tonight?
I guess to bring us back to the start here, Pastor Anderson, just setting the stage in that we've already hit 60 minutes too of what we scheduled for a 90-minute meeting. There's a couple of things, right? There's 4 options that we at least had identified with staff that we presented for you to know where we are and potentially considering. The repeat those are: 1, discuss any of the other finalists, which Simha at least and others have spoken to, being open to having that discussion, and which could incorporate to the second point of reviewing our broader candidate pool and see if we want to bring anyone back in to interview. And then the other 2 items, which are hiring an interim CEO, restart the recruitment process, and don't bring on a board an interim CEO and restart the recruitment process further back to where we were. So I guess a lot going back to the purpose of this tonight's special meeting is to first and foremost have this group discussion to see where everyone is at. And we're being able to have our staff and Deanna here too to be able to provide questions for folks. I think other than at least the one action item that I've recognized and taken note of is we're following up with Regina Cannon to see whether or not she'll be open to come either in a public session or to meet with Harold and I with feedback from other board members and questions that you'd like us to explore. So make sure that we're doing our due diligence in the way that was expressed from Sarah and other members of the board. Beyond that, not seeing, and if anyone has any specific action items that they'd like to explore tonight, happy to entertain those in the form of a motion. We can certainly go into executive session to review 1 or 2 of the other or more finalists that were presented throughout the process and discuss their qualifications in that light for the CEO position. If there are just more feedback that the board would like to provide and ask Harold and I as co-chairs and staff to explore and come back to at next Wednesday's board meeting, we can do that as well. I'm leaving that up open, but I see Simha's hand is raised.
Just thank you for the invitation for action items. I think the 2 that I am thinking of would be, first, that before next board meeting, if either the co-chairs or Leo or Helen could help us flush out what an interim CEO position would look like, whether there might be particular people who are interested, or just how that would work. I think that would really help us determine whether that's a good or viable option. The second is, I think, as Gordon mentioned, I think it is worth reaching out. Well, maybe we can even take just a few minutes in executive session today to decide whether we want to have those other candidates invited back, or see if they're still interested, which would be another action item before the next board meeting.
Yeah, and just a note too, we've lost a few people who've unfortunately haven't been able to stay longer than 6 p.m. or unable to attend tonight's special meeting too. So we're down to 8 board members in that light. I'm not sure, probably our meeting quorum, but just barely. Just wanted to note of that. So should we have any more discussion about any decisions in regards to taking next steps without 4 other board members here? Sarah, you had your hand raised, is that right? No, okay. Simba, if you'd like, I'll be open to, and if you'd like, I'll be happy to entertain a motion to go into executive session. I can assist in that light.
Yes, I make a motion that we would move into executive session to discuss qualifications of other candidates for this position.
Okay, I hear a motion. Do I hear a second?
I just have a question. The public feedback, would that happen before or after if we move to executive session? Because I think there are members of the public who might like to speak. I'm not sure when that happens.
And we had public comment earlier in this meeting. Steph, am I correct? We had it open in the chat, and I believe one person had raised their hand after we closed public session.
That's correct. We had no one sign up for public comment or make any written public comment.
Carrie Anderson, I second the motion.
Okay, just to kind of make an amendment to that motion because we have to add a time to reconvene. And so seeing that it's 6:05, I suggest amending Simha's motion to reconvene at 6:20 p.m. So 15 minutes from now. But I have a motion. Go ahead, Deanna, jump in here if I'm.
Oh, I was going to say if no action will be taken after you all come back from executive session, it might be nice to note that just in case there is, in case the executive session runs shorter than 15 minutes.
Understood. Thank you, Deanna. All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay.
I'll just abstain. Does that mess everything up?
No, I think we
Good.
have it there. So we will go into executive session, reconvene at 6:20 p.m. Board members, please look out for an email, a Zoom link from Sarah Dickmeyer, which will be able to be in your inbox here shortly.
And we use that to enter the exec session?
Correct. And then you'll
Perfect.
get another email to send you back here to public session.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
Now and we'll come back. We'll go into executive session. We'll come back at 6:20. We are back from open session, from executive session. The board had not taken any action in executive session, but we are open to, and I'll look to staff here. Given as was shared earlier from city and county staff, support staff in regards to the interview process, we understand that there were 16 candidates that had gotten to a point of 16 candidates before the close of the annual year. And so we'd be open to working and exploring and reviewing the applications of those 16 candidates as a board, and then setting time in our regular board meeting next Wednesday to have a follow-up to tonight's special meeting. I see. Go ahead, Gordon.
I think you summarized it well, and I look forward to reviewing the 16. I say that out loud, saying that if there are, we don't want to inadvertently out somebody who is was examining this opportunity and may have changed their mind or has not yet alerted their current employer or their family that they're, so I would just ask for staff and Deanna to make sure whatever comes to us, we've also made sure that that's not going to be a surprise or harm a former candidate who may or may not be a current candidate. If that makes sense.
Thank you. I understand there was a miscount too. There was 17 applications. So we'll work with staff, Harold and I as co-chairs, on those 17 resumes and applications and be able to share those with you in advance of next Wednesday's meeting.
And should we make a quick call to you all 17, make sure they're still interested in the position?
Absolutely. We can work on that. Thank you, Harold. Any other comments or questions?
And I guess what I would just say is I would hope that Hawkins is still on the line to do that work. I've been in a lot of these situations, and I don't know exactly how this one was structured, but I would hope that they would do that follow-up.
Thanks, John. Anyone else? All right, and to the public who was here, while we had public comment earlier in this meeting, we had an opportunity for those to be able to write it in the chat function too. I understand Allison Eisinger and Jonathan Hemphill, if not others, were those who had raised their hand. I open now, and for those board members who can say, given the amount of people who were able to tune in now and are hoping to make public comment, that I would like to reopen public comment. I would just call it a reopen public comment in that light. It is 6:25 now, hoping to keep public comment from now until, or 10 minutes from now until 6:35. And so it looks like we already have Allison joining us here. So, but Carrie, I'll let you go ahead and help facilitate our public comment period.
Yeah, we had two hands raised. One was Allison Eisinger and one was Jonathan Hemphill. So I've gone ahead and I've allowed Allison to speak. If you would like to do so, I'm unmuting you now. Okay, you're free to speak.
Thank you so much, Carrie. It's just somewhat disconcerting since I can't quite tell what's going on, but I thank you very much to staff and to the co-chairs. For the record, this is Allison Eisinger. I'm with the Seattle-King County Coalition on Homelessness. I thank you all. These are obviously complex conversations and honestly difficult conversations. I think I would simply like to offer that while the group on this call, both those who were on earlier and those who were able to stay, is made up of extremely diligent and thoughtful community members, I think there is a great deal of lack of information, lack of understanding and concern from the general public, and I would say even from members of the coalition. So I think it would be very helpful to have some additional information gathering and also an opportunity to reflect on what I guess I would summarize as the possibility that as a community we may have created a position that is next to impossible. And so in addition to potentially hearing from Ms. Cannon, I guess I would say I think there is some value in having a full conversation, including people who are not on the implementation board or the governing board, about what it would look like to, what is necessary to help move the work of the RHA forward, and what can community members do to support that. I'm certainly happy to participate in that, and thank you very much for the opportunity to just offer a rambling comment.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay, next I've got Jonathan Hemphill. I'll go ahead and allow you to speak now. You can unmute yourself if you like.
All right, can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome, awesome. Hello, board. As you know, my name is Jonathan. I just wanted to just chime in here and also just echo something that Allison said. You know, I think that we really need to, I'm in agreement with, you know, just stepping back and reviewing the process and getting more information and doing that fact-finding before, you know, we move, like there's a push forward for any action. And then also, you know, I am the staff person, representative staff person for the folks with lived experience on the implementation board, and I also was a part of the recruitment subcommittee, and I could give you guys an insight onto, you know, the work that and the process that went into that, and essentially, like, and with all that said, you know, like I'm very interested in seeing and hearing, you know, why Regina canceled, because it was a lengthy process and it was a lot of work, and I think that what she can bring to the table may be able to inform that process moving forward. if we're going to redo this thing. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Jonathan. Carrie, do we have any other folks lined up for public comment?
We did have one person raise their hand and then lower it, so I'm just going to give them a quick second here to see if they want to put it back up. Otherwise, okay, it looks like that is everyone in the attendee list, but Gordon does have his hand raised in the panelist list.
Thanks. Gordon, before I get to you, just wanted to more thoroughly recap what I at least had noted, my 3 action items with Harold as co-chairs moving forward with staff from now until next Wednesday's meeting is, one, again, to engage Regina to come into open session, invite her to an open session to talk and learn more, or offer a meeting with Harold and I, and for us to report back to the board. The second is to Simha's ask that he mentioned before we went to executive session, was that we flush out what the interim CEO position scope of work could look like. The third is what I mentioned earlier, just right as we returned from executive session, that the board is interested in reviewing the 17 applicants when it was at that stage during the interview and process. If I missed anything, please let me know. In the meantime, let's move to Gordon. Your question or comment?
Yeah, thanks very much, Nate. I think you actually touched on what I was going to suggest. We don't live in worlds that are ideal, but ideally, if we're going to be looking at a good portion of the 17 who expressed interest in the past, that would be also in public session. That would also, or in our next board meeting, that would also be a good time to hear from Regina Cannon in public session. So hopefully her schedule allows her to join us at the next scheduled meeting. Last thing I would say is just there is someone who placed a comment in the chat whose their initials are SB. So it's maybe relevant information. I don't know who SB is, and they may not want to, but somebody should probably try to follow up. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. I see that comment in the chat too. We will follow up with staff on that. Okay, John, I had your hand raised.
You know, I'll pass given the lateness of the hour.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order before we adjourn tonight's meeting? All right, Harold and I will, as co-chairs, have a co-chairs meeting with staff tomorrow morning. We will have more to share with you tomorrow. In the meantime, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn tonight's special meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We are adjourned.